Good evening. I'd like to call the San Bruno City Council and San Bruno Successor Agency meeting of February 11, 2014 to order. First, we'd like to thank the Garden Club for the floral arrangements, and I'll ask Carol, our city clerk, if she could please call roll.
Vice Mayor Chair Medina.
Here.
Council Board Member Ibera.
Here.
Council Board Member Salazar.
Here.
Council Board Member O'Connell. Here.
I would ask Robert if he could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Robert. There's no announcements that I'm aware of. We'll move on to presentation. This evening we're going to receive a presentation on the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission Harry Tracy Water Treatment Plan Improvement Project. And with us this evening is Maureen, who will go ahead and lead us off, representing the agency this evening. Maureen, thank you for being here.
Just a moment and I will cue up. It's right there on the corner.
And while Maureen is getting started, also Mayor Wayne is absent with notice this evening.
As I said, good evening, and thank you again for this opportunity for the San Francisco PUC to speak to you about one of our water system improvement program projects, and I must say one of the largest and most complex. I'm Maureen Berry, and I'm with Communications with the Water System Improvement Program, and with me is Calvin Huey, who is the project manager, and he'll be answering your questions and taking your comments afterwards. Let me go to the next slide. The other one. Oh. What are we doing here that I'm not doing right? Oh, this one. Here we go. Right here? Perfect. Before we started, I just wanted to give you an overview about where we are with the project. As you know, this project is one of more than 80 of the whole water system improvement program projects that are improving our regional Hetch Hetchy water system that spans over 5 counties. We did work from the Central Valley all the way into San Francisco. Right now, we're about 80% complete. We have nearly over 60 projects completed, and there are only 16 left in construction. And so it's coming along very well. We're staying on budget, and I'm sure your constituents will be happy to hear that. So, as we have talked to you in the past, Harry Tracy was built in 1972 and then upgraded in 1980. It's the sole water treatment plant serving the Crystal Springs Reservoir system. Together, the system provides critical local water storage and also serves as an emergency source for supplementary water supply for all the residents in San Mateo and San Francisco counties. I'm pleased to say that this project is now 70% complete, and it's on schedule to have all the major work done by December of this year. And as you're well aware, the San Andreas fault is very nearby, and as a result, the goal of this project is to seismically reinforce it so that it would sustain just limited damage following a major earthquake, and also so that it will be able to deliver 140 million gallons per day to our water customers within 24 hours of an earthquake. And this is a recent photo of all the construction. To your right is the new treated water reservoir that we are building right now. It really has been a major portion of the construction at the site. It's a new 11 million gallon treated water reservoir. The foundation, interior columns, and the majority of the inner and outer walls were completed the last year. The remaining inner walls and roof will be finished this spring. And this is a photo that shows the overall plant to date. This is another look at what the construction was from last November. There was multiple layers of metal and concrete, and this is on top of a concrete foundation. This is an amazing site, and we're hoping that maybe if you have the chance, you can come up and see it. Certainly have an open invitation anytime. You may recall that when we were doing the planning for this project, some of the seismic analysis actually uncovered a small trace of the San Andreas Fault under the whole plant. It was called the Serra Fault, or Serra Trace. And so as a result, we really redesigned this whole project. And it was, we abandoned 2 other treated water reservoirs and are able to consolidate it into one. And so this is quite a task. It did cost us more money, but we are secure now that we can provide you water after an earthquake, and also the nearby residents and the community is safe should anything happen after an earthquake. Here's a close-up of the interior columns during construction. When it's all done, the entire structure will be wrapped with seismic cables and reinforced with shotcrete. The reservoir is designed to move with an earthquake. The roof floats on 88 concrete columns. It is reinforced by pre-stressed vertical tendons and is attached to the walls by neoprene bearing pads. I'm sorry, I really need my glasses, but I'm doing the best I can. Did I leave them over there? Okay. As well as the addition of the work with the treated water reservoir, we've also put in 2 tunnels. And one of them is bringing water in, and the other one is bringing it out. And if you look in the picture, you can see how large this is, because it's also as the gentlemen are really as tall, the workers there, as the whole tunnel. Last fall, we also completed seismic reinforcement of a pipeline on the Millbrae side of the plant, and that runs between Meadows Elementary School and a daycare center. And the project actually did an excellent job with the community and working with the daycare center and the needs of the neighborhood. That worked out very well, and it was a great cooperation by everyone. And this photo also illustrates what we're doing around dust control measures. In addition to watering the site multiple times a day, we also are covering all the soil, so we can ensure that we keep that inside the plant footprint as much as possible. And this project, as you can imagine, besides what I've shown you, includes many other improvements and reliability upgrades. And this is the brand new tank that's pictured here is for the filtering process. This filtered water will flow by gravity into the new reservoir. And last spring, we also began building 5 new filters to increase our treatment capacity. And these are on schedule to be completed this summer. And you'll also notice, if you're driving by 280, there's a new wash water tank, one of the many improvements to the site. This month, we're going to start the 6th total plant shutdown. Now, normally everything stays on operational while we do this construction, but we're at this point where we need to shut down so that we can allow for intensive construction activities. And we expect to do evening shifts and night work from approximately February 24th through late March, and we are preparing a construction notice right now that we're going to be doing along Helen Drive and to other areas. We've got very good, after all these months, pretty close communications with the neighbors and on a first-name basis, so we'll be notifying them and also of what to expect. We haven't had that much problems with this kind of work generally, because a lot of it's included inside the plant, even though they're working 24 hours. So it seemed to work, and whenever we've had instances where neighbors have complained or they've talked about this, we've tried to make other accommodations, and that seems to have worked pretty well. This fall, when everything is complete, we hope to have the neighbors in for an open house. The site will be less of a construction site, more safe, and so they'll get a closer look at the treated water reservoir. So on the screen, you'll also notice that we have a 24-hour answer line that has been very helpful. They can get a hold of us anytime. That the service has been really very good. And then we are also online, and we have an email that people take advantage of all the time. So I'm going to turn it over at this point to Calvin. If you have questions specifically about the project and various aspects, we'd be delighted to take them. And again, we hope that you come by.
Please go ahead. Calvin, you have anything to add to Marie, or just for questions?
No, I'm ready for questions, and we're also ready to give a tour anytime.
Probably not right now.
Ready to come by.
But appreciate that. Questions from council, Ken?
Through the chair, we did tour last year, and I believe the storage tank, the foundation work was just completed, and so we didn't see any walls. So just for the benefit of, I guess, context, how many gallons are going to be stored in there, and what is in relation to an entire community? How much would that serve?
Actually, the storage is about 11 million gallons. So that gives us the ability to produce 140 million gallons per day of treated water. So that's really the goal of this project. By the time we're done, we're going to be able to treat 140 million gallons. So that 11 million storage just comes into play with our filtration process.
And how thick is that wall?
It varies from the base of about 2 feet to about 1 feet thick on top. Actually, the picture doesn't do it justice. You have to go in there and just look in the top, or look in the top of the scaffolding and just look down.
And how tall is it?
It's roughly about 50, 60 feet.
Yeah.
So
Great.
it's quite tall.
Amazing
Yeah.
structure. Thank you.
Any other questions? Maureen, Calvin, we want to thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you for being here this evening. We appreciate it, and as you offered, I'm sure we'll be looking forward to that tour.
Okay, thank you much.
Have a good rest of the week. Okay, moving on to review of the agenda. There are 3 items at this time we want to bring forward for consideration. One is under item 11, receive the annual report from the Personnel Board. With council approval, I'd like to move that after public comment. And also, we have 2 other items under conduct of business, item E and F, to be considered to move to the February 25th meeting. City Manager?
Yes. Did you want to say something?
Are we going to say the same thing?
Probably not.
The item that you're going to pull to move forward, you want to have after the public hearing, after 8.
Okay. After 8, after 9, as long as we pull it up, I think Joe and Ed will be happy. So, sure, we can do that. City Manager.
Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council, staff is requesting that we pull 2 items that have been included on this agenda for 2 different reasons. I'll briefly let you know what those are. First, item number E, regarding the award of a construction contract, is proposed to be pulled because there is continuing to be substantive new information and new discussions going on that staff believes are necessary to provide additional review and analysis before we ask for your action. That item is expected to return at the February 25th meeting, depending on the outcome of that additional review and discussion. The item number 10F, we're requesting to pull because it was not possible for the staff report to be distributed timely to the City Council for your consideration and review, and rather than put this into a situation of a simple oral staff report, I believe there's time for your consideration of this if it returns to you on February 25th.
Okay, there's been a request by staff to pull to the 25th the E and F. Is council fine with that? And moving Personnel Board up to after public hearings. Okay, let's move on to approval of minutes. City clerk has notified us that the minutes will be in our February 25th packet. At that meeting, they'll be brought up for review and approval. Item 7 under consent calendar. All items are considered routine, implemented by earlier council action and/or enacted by one, can be enacted by one motion if there is no separate discussion unless requested by a council member, citizen, or staff. Any action on the consent calendar?
Move to accept.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you. Move on to public hearings. We have our first item under item 8. Hold a public hearing, waive the first reading, and introduce an ordinance to regulate the inspection, repair, and replacement of private Orangeburg pipe sewer laterals at the time of sale of residential property. Clara?
Honorable Vice Mayor, council members, good evening. At the last council meeting, staff presented to you the critical nature of maintaining the structural integrity of our sewer system in order for us to protect public health. At that time, at the last council meeting also, staff sought policy direction and feedback from you for the development of a ordinance regulating Orangeburg private lateral at the time of sale. What you have before you is the result of your feedback and policy direction given at the last council meeting. This ordinance would require for any property owner who at the time of any transfer of properties built between 1940 and 60 to have a visual inspection, and if the private lateral is a Orangeburg pipe, then to have a video inspection, and if the pipe is defective, then will have to be repaired or replaced to the satisfaction of the city. This would add a approximate $290 permit fee cost to the property owners, depending on the type of action what they will need to take. If will be only just a visual inspection and the pipe is not Orangeburg pipe, that will be the lower dollar amount. But if the pipe will need to be replaced and have a final inspection, that will go up to $290. Also, in addition, will be the cost of repairing or replacement of the private lateral, which can be, based on our best estimate, between $3,000 up to, in some instances, up to $10,000. Was indicated in the staff report that staff is still in discussion with the baykeepers to discuss the possible credit for the program implemented already in the Glenview neighborhood for the replacement of the lateral. And they indicated yesterday that they would be supportive of, if that is your desire, to postpone the implementation of the ordinance for one more year. That basically you could consider alternative to establish the time of implementation or starting time of the implementation of this ordinance this April or next year April is what is your wish or decision tonight. Depending on your approval, then this ordinance will be implemented this April or next April, or even the whole ordinance consideration could be postponed if that's what your desire is until next year. And between now and the implementation time, staff will have a aggressive education process and outreach to the real estate community and also to the property owner to make sure that the requirement of the ordinance will be known by everybody. This is my short presentation if you have any question.
Before we open it up to the public hearing, any questions by council to staff? Ken?
Can you again reiterate, this has been an issue with real estate industry and as far as point of sale issues, whether it's sewer laterals, whether it's other items, and improvements in the home. And they've been against it, my understanding is because it holds up, the process of transacting a house or purchasing or selling a house. You've altered this ordinance to allow a 6-month turnaround with a bond, to cover the cost. So is this satisfactory to, in your understanding, is this satisfactory to that industry as far as the problems with point of sale ordinances?
Councilmember Ivana, how was indicated by us last meeting, most of the agencies on the peninsula has already this type of ordinance in place. And yes, based on the concern not to hold up any transfer of property, in this proposed ordinance is included a 180 days delay if it's requested from the time of the escrow with a 7,500 bond. If they are requested, that can be approved by the city. And that will minimize any possible impact on the property owners at the time of sale.
Okay. Do you want to add?
If I could just add, staff did, as part of the staff level work to prepare the ordinance for the council's consideration, we did contact and review other cities to understand in our region what is the norm. And many other cities, as the director indicated, have such a program. They also have this 6-month timeline opportunity, and we're not aware that there's been substantive opposition to the ordinance with its implementation in other communities. We are similarly not aware, having provided the public notice that's required of our initial efforts 2 weeks ago and tonight, we are similarly not aware of a significant concern among the real estate community. We think that we have addressed in a reasonable manner the legitimate concerns that real estate professionals and their customers may have.
Because basically it's nearly every home, a majority of the homes in San Bruno are built during the time of when Orangeburg was, predominantly installed in the 40s and 60s. So every transaction will more than likely, if hadn't been replaced yet, will more than likely have that inspection and possibly a replacement.
Based on our information available, about 50% of the homes in San Bruno were built between that time period, between the 40s and 60s. Actually, mainly most of the homes west of 280 and some other small area east of 280.
My last question is on the inspection process. How does one visually inspect whether it's an Orangeburg pipe or not? I mean, I understand, contacting the building department and then your state in the ordinance that the building official will come out, the inspector will come out and visually inspect on whether it's Orangeburg or not.
Was my understanding discussing this issue internally with the building department and us that in the cases of the homes here in San Bruno, in most cases, they can make a visual determination if the pipe is Orangeburg or not. In some other instances, they have to open, actually, to have a to open the ground to see the pipe itself.
So, what I'm trying to get at is, I mean, if it's found to be Orangeburg, then the next step is to have video evidence and have it videoed. Wouldn't the video take care of that, all of that? I mean, it's just like, it seems like we have this extra step, and I'm not sure if that's necessary.
The reason why the visual inspection is first to make a visual determination that the pipe is a Orangeburg pipe or not. It is my understanding that on the video itself, you cannot really say if the pipe is in good condition. You cannot really say if it's Orangeburg or not. You have to make a visual determination, and basically, in some instances, potholing, that basically digging down to the pipe itself to if it's not accessible without to pothole at that location. Was my understanding that in many instances, when the pipe's coming out from the home, you can, without any potholing, you can see visually what kind of pipe is. If it's not, then they have to pothole at that location and to make a visual determination if it's Orangeburg or not. And they need to video inspect only just if the pipe is a Orangeburg pipe. If it's not, then they don't need to do anything.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I'm sorry, if I may just add one important point to Councilmember Ibarra's question. And that is that if the baykeepers agree to have a delay in the implementation of the ordinance for a year, that actually allows quite a bit of time for individuals in the community and real estate agents to prepare for the implementation of that ordinance. And I think that allows us to do more outreach and allows those individuals to check into their status and determine if they need to replace the pipe well in advance of even putting the home on the market, for example. So we're very optimistic that if we can conclude that agreement with Baykeeper, it really addresses the concern of a point of sale ordinance. And in effect, this ordinance would become an ordinance that would have resulted in the repair and replacement of these pipes even before the home is sold and would have no impact on the escrow or the sale process. So we're hopeful that that's an advantage of the Baykeeper agreement if we can conclude it.
Well, the operative word is Baykeeper in this, because whether or not you're against or for point of sale issues, I don't see any other way that we can satisfy this issue, and without having the Baykeepers attack the entire city. Thank you.
Irene?
Could you clarify for everyone why the houses that we're targeting are between 1940 and 1960, not before, and not necessarily afterwards either?
The reason why in our agreement with the Baykeepers were included only just homes built between this time period is the reason that the construction using the Orangeburg pipes was relevant during this time period, just during the World War II, when the material, wasn't any other material available. This was the most readily available material, and that's why this basically wood fiber pressed together wood fiber type of pipe was used during that time due to lack of other more valuable material at that time. The name and this, unfortunately, the life cycle, this is a more less durable type of material, and the expected life for this pipe is up to 50 years. And what any other pipe, like the plastic PVC type of pipes, they life expectancy is longer. And right now, all of those pipes or Orangeburg pipes built between up to the 60s is over that 50-year of life expectancy. And the assumption is that most of them, they are damaged and need replacement.
Okay, so if you have a house that was built before 1940, you don't have to worry about your laterals so much? Is that basically the message?
I think everybody should be worried about their private lateral, that how was discussed at the last meeting too, the integrity of the whole sewer system. The whole system works as a whole system. The physical integrity is very important. But based on our agreement with the baykeeper, this was the highest risk of problem area, and that's why was included in our agreement. And based on your policy direction, this ordinance is crafted to target exactly that high risk area, and what was included in our agreement with the baykeepers.
Okay, thank you.
Michael?
Thank you. So regarding the age, I had the same question about why stop at that age. And so I understand that the Orangeburg is probably the most, or the weakest of all the materials that could possibly be in the ground. But I could see a lot of other reasons why we wouldn't want to limit this to just Orangeburg pipe, because the older pipes, I mean, there could be settling in the ground that cause shifts in the pipes. The old cast iron could be corroded. I know there's clay pipes in places. I don't know if the laterals are clay or not, but I know that we've had an SSO, at least one that I know of, that was caused by a hunk of clay pipe running down and lodging itself somewhere downstream. And there's also the fats, oils, and greases that go down the grain that could accumulate certainly over a period of many, many years. That could be an issue within those that could possibly be caught if we were to extend this beyond just the Orangeburg years, if you will. I also see that we're allowing like a 5-year period where an inspection could continue over 5 years, and I'm wondering within that 5 years if there was an issue with say fats, oils, and greases, or if it's an area that maybe we identify that has an unusual amount of settling or movement. Is 5 years really adequate then to say that it's still going to be clear after that time? And then the 20 years after something's been replaced, again, it's well within the lifespan of current materials, but what kind of buildup could we get in that time period that might lead to the same situation? So maybe the pipe's not deteriorated, but is it significantly clogged and create an opportunity for an SSO, which is really what we're trying to get after. So.
Council member, just to summarize the follow-up comment, yes, always SSO cannot be entirely prevented. Always is possible because the SSO, even if a lateral will be replaced, that is no 100% guarantee. Based on general experience, is the agency's experience that after a inspection and repair of a lateral, you can expect that for the next 5 years, you will have no problem. Always can happen something, but based on the industry experience and the agency's experience, a repaired lateral will still function properly for the next 5 years. And also that is the expectation that one will be replaced entirely, then for the next 20 years, a reasonable guarantee that will function properly. If in meantime, any movement of soil. Those are high-risk possibilities that will damage the pipe, or surface stormwater will undermine and will be damaged. Those hopefully will be monitored by all of the property owners, and those changes can be seen many times even visually, and then you can act to prevent any further damage or any further SSO. I will just say that this 5-year and 10 years is included in most of the agencies' ordinance around us, and is a consistency between how is included in this draft, in this ordinance with the other agencies.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think if you agree that, you know, the clogging of these laterals could be significant within a number of years, I would still think that maybe we're allowing too much. I was kind of thinking this sort of akin to what the DMV does with smog checks. So your car has to get smog checked every 4 years, and if you sell the car, you have to do a smog check. Even if you just had a smog check done within a few months, you still have to get it done. And it's still a good idea, and it definitely helps keep the air clean, and this is something that could prevent SSO. So I'm wondering if maybe more frequent, I mean, because we really are talking about it at time of transfer. So if something was replaced 5 years ago, but the house is being sold, I think it might make it easier to implement something that's more consistent. So we're just looking at every time that there's a change of ownership that we have this that we need to check off. So that's kind of my opinion on that. I also had a question about how the mechanics of implementing this, whether we're going to rely on sellers to sort of self-report the fact that they're putting their home on the market, and is there going to be any proactive effort on the city's part to go out and make sure that everybody who has a listing or has a sign on their lawn is actually going through the process, and are we staffed for that, and is that really part of the program that we're suggesting?
Certainly this is the minimum requirement of the 5 years included in this ordinance. If your desire is to further restrict that time frame, certainly is up to your decision to make. Was our intent to reach out to the real estate community, and the intent was for this ordinance to be implemented based on communication with the real estate community and the property owners to make sure that everybody must follow the existing rules and requirement at the sale of the property.
Okay, but getting back to my question about how do we know? Are we relying on the homeowner, and is there going to be any proactive sort of, are we going to check listings? Are we going to check with the local realtors?
If I could jump in and answer that question.
Connie?
May I?
Please.
Thank you. The answer to the specific question is no. It is not staff's intent to initiate some sort of a new program for checking real estate listings. A legal requirement implemented by ordinance in the local jurisdiction becomes a disclosure requirement for the real estate professional. So it is their legal responsibility to know and advise their clients and adhere to local requirements in the transfer of property, so that we have reasonable expectation and ability to rely on those professional obligations to assure that those items, that people who are selling their homes and who have that legal responsibility for disclosure with or without a real estate professional, that is a sufficient safeguard to the integrity of the program, and it is not necessary, nor is it our interest to invent a new program whereby we will be going out and looking at real estate listings.
Okay. And final question on that. that satisfies our agreement with the baykeeper that,
It does.
Okay.
Yes.
thank you.
This is a public hearing. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address the council or staff on this item? If not, when we close public hearing, there will not be another opportunity to speak on this topic. Anybody? Any action from council on closing public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So back to council. Two real quick on the visual inspection. It was brought up about, my understanding, and I'm just going off some memory, is for the visual inspection, if you do a video of the line, I think not only can you tell its condition, but you should be able to tell if it's Orangeburg or not. And I think, is that not always the case? Or obviously it will give you the condition of it, but not the other, you're saying?
Well, Council member, was my understanding that on the video, you cannot say if it's the pipe in a good condition, you cannot make a distinction if the pipe is Orangeburg or not. Only just through visual inspection.
Okay. There were a few things brought up by council here as far as more frequency or consistency, whether delay, how do we do the trust verify per se. And I believe, like the city manager indicated, at the time of escrow, it becomes beholden of the realtor to make sure that this gets done. It gets a video inspection or some type of an inspection and a report that quantifies that so it goes through with the documents. I know in other cities, the escrow is held up, and all of a sudden there becomes a panic because the time window has become very short and they need to have the sale go forward. So there are mechanisms that are already established in other communities that ensure that this process gets done. But I wanted to bring it back to my colleagues to see what they would like to do with this item or any further discussion.
Okay. My understanding is the staff put in the ability for the seller to do a bond so that they have 6 months so that they do not have to worry about holding up the sale. So I think that's excellent job, and I think that should relieve anybody's anxiety about the timing. I understand what Michael's saying about the 5 years, but having had mine replaced, it's I don't know if more than or more frequently is particularly necessary. It's a big commitment to do that more often, I think.
Well,
So
it wouldn't be more often, it would be at the time of sale, but we're
But
not
if you sell it-
grandfathering as far.
Well, no, I don't mean that, but I mean, so if you get it done, 4 years later, you sell your house, and then the next person sells it in a year, that means it would be done 2 times in 5 years, or, however thing, and I don't particularly think that's necessary. I'm thinking we might look at this a different way. We've never had this kind of ordinance before. I think it's a great first start. I think it does what Baykeeper wants us to do. I think it works toward eliminating as many SSOs as possible. So there's nothing saying that we can't implement this. We can do what Clara was saying about having a strong outreach to people to explain to them why fixing their laterals, even if it's not Orangeburg, but keeping a watch on your lateral is something smart to do. And we've skirted around the words, we've never said them, but if your lateral is broken, what happens is raw sewage goes into your yard. And that's what we're trying to prevent. So we haven't said it in this whole conversation, this half-an-hour conversation, but that's what this is for, so that your dog walking through the yard, your kids walking through the yard, your yard itself doesn't get destroyed because of raw sewage. And this is what it's supposed to prevent. So I think this is great. I think we should wait till Baykeepers tells us if they'll use the Glenview houses for our credit or not, and use that time period to do an outreach for people, and then implement this. If in 6 months or a year we find that it's not enough, then I think we can change it. But I think what they have here is a great first step, and that's my opinion.
Ken, Mike? Ken?
And I agree with Irene. I mean, new homeowner or someone selling their house, they want an assurance that, you know, that they're not going to get called back, or there's going to be some escrow problem with a problem with the lateral. We've been requiring inspections of roofs and certain items now, and I know there are other cities. For example, the city of Burlingame has been requiring sewer inspections for at least 20 years on a transfer of ownership. And you can clearly see when you drive up and down streets in Burlingame, you see the big 4x4 patch of asphalt in the street of where they perform it. And it's not a visual inspection. It's actually, you have to pay to dig and excavate and take a look. And I believe they have a period of, if you've had an inspection probably within 5 or 10 years, then you don't have to have another inspection. So that's probably a jurisdiction to look into as far as how they've been doing it. And I believe they still have, it's still, you know, it's still in force. But I think it's very important that, like Irene says, is that, and Michael is referring to, is that, you know, that these property owners should, you know, not shy away from wanting to know for sure whether, you know, what the condition of their sewer laterals are.
Just regarding Irene's original question about the age span, do you guys see any reason to want to go older than 1940, or do we really need to stop at 1940, or do we just make it anything prior to 1960? Or remove the age limits completely and just say anything older than 20 years has to be inspected?
Any comments?
I'm not sure how the industry or how inspectors or how property owners are supposed to, one, know how old their house is, and if it's clearly between 40 and 60, are they almost guaranteed that it's going to be Orangeburg? And is there a definite cutoff point as far as when Orangeburg was not being used? But I would rather recommend to the community, to the residents, to check their sewer laterals instead of making them inspect their sewer laterals, you know, whenever they sell a house.
Well, I agree. I would prefer a voluntary program,
Right.
but since we're going down this route anyway and it's required, let's make it a good one.
But I mean, I agree with you. I mean, the clay pipes are probably just as bad, you know, on the older.
Irene?
Thank you. Clara, is there any data or any information you can give us about houses with laterals, houses that were built before 1940? Is the incident of sewer lateral failure as great or greater than from 1940 to 1960s? Is it something we should be looking at, or should we go forward with this and then change it later, or we have time to change it if we wait anyway?
Councilman Baruch Connor, I don't have a specific data showing what is the rate of failure for lateral build between different time period. Certainly about 80% of our whole system is still made, used of clay material, and they in time is a logical degradation, and theoretically older pipe will have a higher risk, is logical. Most of the agencies, they are not specifying year of construction of the homes for private lateral regulation. The reason that is this proposal, what is in front of you, specifying homes only home built during that time period, that was negotiated with Baykeeper in the most narrowly way possible. That was negotiated to minimize the least impact to our residents. But this is the least impact, the minimum what the city should or could do, but certainly it's up to you to make the decision from that minimum how far you want to go.
So I tend to agree with Michael as far as the lower limit. If your house was built before 1960, then you should get your lateral looked at, and the other restrictions are that should apply. So I'm thinking that that's the best way to go. So let me ask you another question as well. Did I understand it correctly that you're saying we can do all the talking we need to tonight and then not enact this resolution until a year later or in 6 months until we hear back from Baykeeper? Or yeah, I was a little confused on that part.
Yeah, let me just clarify. We are recommending that you complete the first reading tonight and subsequently the second reading at your next council meeting, but that you do take action to approve this ordinance, if you wish, with some modifications per your discussion. We're also recommending that you give us direction about the issue of the effective date of the ordinance.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we have already heard back from the Baykeepers, and they have consented, agreed with the idea that the work that will be undertaken in the Crestmore neighborhood does satisfy a equivalent 1 year worth of Orangeburg pipe inspection and potential replacement.
Okay.
So that decision now rests with the city council, but we do, as to the effective date of the ordinance, we do recommend that you take action as scheduled currently to complete your review and approval of the ordinance.
Okay, along with saying to enact it in April of 2015.
Yes, either in 2014 or 2015, yes.
Okay, and if I may, if I understand it correctly, if we delay a year, it gives us a further opportunity to do a more thorough job of educating people about what we intend to do and all those things. Okay.
Yes. So as the director indicated earlier in answer to a previous question, we were highly mindful of the need to maintain maximum flexibility for the city council in considering any mandatory requirements. In other words, our agreement with the Baykeepers includes a requirement for presentation and consideration of this ordinance. But compared to other cities, we were, I would say, very effective in our negotiation to maintain the maximum parameters. That's how we got to the 1940 to 1960. In a similar vein, we went back to the Baykeepers. We said, look, we have this other program going on. We're going to get a lot of sewer laterals replaced. We're going to get rid of a lot of Orangeburg pipe. We need to be able to present that additional option to the city council. So that's the framework within which we have crafted the negotiations, as well as the opportunity for you to determine how you'd like to implement this program.
So what I'm hearing minimally from staff is that you'd like us to waive the first reading and introduce the ordinance. And we also have that option, which sounds like the council may want to have it delayed for up to a year from its implementation, but also in that time, having more information brought back to council that gives us more detailed information about if we were to go from anything prior to 1960, or no?
Oh,
I'm asking, that's what I've heard collective out of the council.
I don't think, I personally don't need any more information. I think what Clara said is absolutely right. The older it is, the more chance it has to fail, especially if it's been a house that hasn't been sold in, it's been sold in the same ownership for 50 years or whatever. So I at this point, would like to recommend that we change the ordinance to say any house that was built before 1960, and then have the effective date in April 2015, with the understanding that we do outreach to the communities about why we are doing this and how it's going to be implemented. That's what I'm looking at.
Ken? Yes, Clara.
Councilmember O'Connor, if I can ask for clarification, that would target all of how the ordinance is crafted now, and the reason is between 40 and 60, that specifically includes only just Orangeburg pipe. If the pipe is not Orangeburg, this ordinance doesn't require any inspection of that pipe or any replacement of the pipe, only just if it's Orangeburg. The question is, if you intend then to extend the requirement of this ordinance for all pipes, for all homes built before the 60. But that will be a change in the program. If you are targeting only just Orangeburg pipe, then extending the time frame is not effective in the sense that probably very highly unlikely that any home built in the 20s or 30s will have Orangeburg pipe. That material wasn't used before World War II.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So how do we, okay, I understand what you're saying, and I understand to change it, we would have to recraft the whole thing and do all that stuff. Is there a way to add to the ordinance so that we include pipes that include houses that were built prior to 1940 without, I mean, can we add a paragraph that says, in addition to the Greenberg pipes, any homes that were built before 1940, regardless of what kind of pipe was used, need to have their laterals inspected at point of sale?
Everything is possible, and yes, would be possible to add or say additional to expand the program. I would defer to Mark Zaffarano to say if this then would be a substantial change to the draft ordinance, and would be my expectation that would be a substantive change to the ordinance would require to be reintroduced, but I would defer to Mark.
Because, and I'm going to ask staff, because in essence, that would be a huge change to what we have here presented to us. In addition, I know staff's concern is us meeting the minimum requirements that we have obligated ourselves with baykeepers, which this does that and meets it under their timeline. And if we delay it for a period of time up to a year, it doesn't mean that it can't come back, revisited, and modified at that time with any additional information as far as the year, as far as the type of material. Is that correct?
Yes, I think you're correct on both counts. On the last one, certainly you could come back and revisit the ordinance at any time during the year. And then you're also correct that I think if we were to make that type of change in the ordinance based on your direction, we should bring it back for reintroduction because it does affect a number of provisions in the ordinance.
Okay, well, Irene's still, go ahead. She's still going.
Well, no.
She's still going.
Yeah, some days I do, some days I don't. Okay, so I understand all the things you said, and I would not want to delay this unnecessarily and mess up what you guys have written. So I'm willing to wait and then revisit it at another time.
Yeah. Could I just offer you another suggestion here? I don't think the city attorney meant to suggest that you would need to defer your consideration. the recommendation from staff is that the change you're talking about would be a substantive change that would simply require repeating the first reading, public hearing, and then a subsequent second reading. It would delay your action essentially by 2 weeks. I would recommend that if the City Council is interested in strengthening the ordinance, and as the Director indicated, expanding the program, that you direct us to do that now. We would bring the ordinance back to you on the 25th. It's not a huge change. We have plenty of time to make the revisions you're discussing tonight, and that you would then consider it again for first reading, subsequent second reading, and then with an effective date of April of 2015. That approach would be consistent with what I heard your suggestion to be.
Ken?
The irony here is that if the baykeepers didn't stick their nose into our community, we wouldn't be discussing this. I am not in favor of making the ordinance stricter. I'm not in favor of having the ordinance, period. But I realize that the baykeepers have us. And so if we don't follow at least to their minimum requirements, they're going to come after us again. And so I'm fine with the way it's laid out now. We can discuss at a future time as far as making the ordinance stricter, but I'm just not in favor of that. We've gone all these years, and people should know that this is. And we can do a community outreach, and we can let them know the importance of, of checking their sewer laterals, but we can't. I just don't believe it's our job to make them do it.
Yeah, I'm prepared to move forward with what we minimally have to do because we're obligated and required. We can always bring it back and make changes to it, but for now, I'm prepared to go forward with what we have now with it being delayed.
I'm going to make a motion that we waive the first reading.
Second?
Sure. Well,
This is to waive the first reading.
Motion to waive the first reading?
They closed the hearing.
We already closed the public hearing.
Yes.
I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
no?
Motion fails 2-2. So with that, City Attorney, does that mean that we have to read it in its entirety, or does that just mean since it failed, it has to come back?
I would recommend that before taking the time to read it in its entirety, you might want to take a straw poll to determine if there is going to be a majority or 3 votes for introduction of either this ordinance or some variation thereof.
Because if we have to read it, then either Irene or Michael get to read it. It's in its entirety. So the city, yes, by it failing, we would have to read the ordinance in its entirety. That is a requirement, which I think we might give to the city attorney or city clerk. I don't know who.
Point of
I'd be
order.
happy to read it for you.
Ken.
Are we not? We're voting to waive the first reading. Doesn't mean that you're voting to approve the ordinance.
Correct.
So let's not read the ordinance and then, and then have the ordinance fail.
I think
please.
that's why the city attorney is asking for a little more direction from council so we can avoid that.
A point of clarification then. If it turns out that there is not 3 people to approve the ordinance, however, if it's read or not, well, let me see if I can ask this question the correct way. Do we need to read an ordinance that will not be approved?
No.
So if the next step is, if the vice mayor says, is this ordinance going to be approved, and it's a 2-2 straw vote, then we just stop here. Is that correct?
I would make a suggestion. I think we've already been down this path once, so why don't we go ahead, if my colleagues would go ahead and waive the first reading, we can have the introduction of the ordinance. It would potentially at this point fail with a 2-2, which then would have to come back. Am I incorrect?
yes, of course, we would recommend that there be some direction as to what changes would be made in the ordinance between now and the time that it comes back for introduction.
Right, and we already had experienced this earlier this year when we had a 2-2, so the ordinance would either need to come back at a later time, or we need to direct staff to come up with some various alternatives.
Okay.
So, do we want to go ahead and reconsider waiving the first reading?
Restated. Move to waive the first reading.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so that has been waived.
Through the chair, I'd like to introduce the ordinance for adoption.
City Clerk?
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
I'm sorry, hold on. You're introducing the ordinance, it's not for adoption, you're introducing the ordinance.
Yes.
Right, okay. Just
Thank you.
clarifying for the record.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
No.
Councilmember O'Connell.
No.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Aye. So, there's a 2-2, it fails.
Yep.
So obviously, is there any additional direction that council wants to give to staff on this, or has staff quite heard enough to where they have direction and we can bring it back when we obviously have our mayor back?
Through the chair, what I would like, and nothing to do with what my colleagues want to add to the ordinance, I'd like a little more discussion on how a resident is actually going to be faced with this inspection process. Whether it's a whole scenario where you walk right through it with, and that you're going to determine that you're going to sell your house, and that what exactly is the realtor going to have or the agent going to have to present to the homeowner, and how they're going to proceed with that. In addition, nothing against staff, but I don't think we've got enough information on this Orangeburg and what to its extent. Now, if you can clearly tell me that certain subdivisions in this community are Orangeburg, like Glenview, like certain Crestmore neighborhoods, fine. But now, if you're going to certain areas that were 60 years old, where are we at? And I don't want to be told that it's what other jurisdictions have said and things. I really would like as professional of an opinion or report from someone that lives Orangeburg, or knows it, and so if we can have something like that, because all I know now is that it was built, it was used within a certain time frame, and it came from New York, so and it's got this certain deterioration rate. So I just think that there's more information out there for us to be able to tell our homeowners.
Is that enough direction? And anything else, Mary? Connie? Anything?
Yes, I think we have enough direction. We will have to figure out what to do with that, and we will return at the next meeting.
Yes.
But
Thank
we
you.
have enough direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to our second public hearing. Item B, hold public hearing, waive the second reading and adopt 2013 Fire and Building Code Ordinance and adopted by reference and with amendments. David.
Good evening, Honorable Vice Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is David Woltering. I'm the city's Community Development Director. The state-mandated 2013 California building codes, including fire code, with proposed local amendments, were first presented to you at your January 28, 2014 meeting. At that meeting, staff provided an overview of the codes as well as the proposed local amendments. Council indicated its support for the codes and the local amendments with one exception. The council asked that the proposed local amendment pertaining to a requirement to install fire sprinklers involving specified larger additions and/or retrofits to 1- and 2-family residential structures be returned for further consideration when all 5 council members would be present, as only 4 members were present at the January 28th meeting. Otherwise, council waived first reading, introduced the 2013 California Building Code ordinances, and set tonight, February 11th, 2014, for second reading and adoption of the ordinances. Staff returned the local amendment pertaining to the fire sprinkler requirement to the council at a special meeting of council on February 6th. At that meeting, the council majority did not support this proposed local amendment, citing concerns about cost, the small number of homes that would be captured by this requirement, and the relatively low incremental life safety benefit of fire sprinklers over the installation of smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. Otherwise, council approved the proposed local amendments that evening. Tonight, staff is recommending that the council hold a public hearing on this matter, waive second reading, and adopt the 2013 Fire and Building Code ordinances to be adopted by reference with the approved local amendments. Staff has modified the Fire Code ordinance that was included in your packet to delete the identified section 903.2.8.1 pertaining to the fire sprinkler requirement for the additions and/or retrofits to 1- and 2-family residential structures. This replacement ordinance was placed at the dais, and there are strikeouts indicating the amendment, the change. Both Fire Department and Building Division staff members are present this evening to answer any questions that you may have on this matter. Thank you.
Any questions from council to staff at this time? Michael?
Through the chair. I wasn't present at the first meeting. I was absent with notice, by the way. And I had some questions that I forgot to bring up at the second meeting, and these are more procedural things. But I was wondering about sections that are there's language in each section that I was curious about, and one of them is regarding the city's requirement to enforce these things. And it says in there that no section of the city's building code shall impose a mandatory duty of enforcement on the city. And I'm wondering, when it comes to state building codes and when it comes to our amendments, is this basically saying that we're not being forced by the state to enforce them, and we're not taking on the responsibility locally to enforce them? What does that really mean legally?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the entire question. Mark,
So
go ahead.
So the language in here, and I don't know, Mark, are you prepared to answer that?
Yeah, I think if I understand the question, in general, cities are not required to enforce their ordinances. They have the discretion to enforce those ordinances. And there's no difference in that exercise of discretion between these codes and any other city codes.
So then why do we explicitly state that in this particular ordinance?
That's a good question. I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that, but the building official may. But it may be a requirement when adopting by reference to explicitly indicate that, to make sure that it's clear that we don't have a duty to enforce those codes, just as we do not have a mandatory duty to enforce any other ordinance.
Okay. Any further comment?
Want to follow up?
That's correct.
Okay. So it's due to the fact that it's by reference. Okay. And then the other section I had a question about was the violation penalties, where it states that running afoul of this essentially becomes a misdemeanor, and every day that it's not in compliance is an additional charge. And I'm wondering, without that language, does the city still have an ability to impose fines but not make it a criminal offense? And does that necessarily weaken our ability to enforce anything that we enact?
So I'll be happy to answer that. That provision is the same as other provisions in our code, which say that violation of municipal ordinances can be charged as a misdemeanor. They are not often charged as misdemeanors, but they can be. And that also allows the discretion to staff to use all of the other enforcement tools that are in the code. So for example, there's a fine and code fine process with a hearing, and those sorts of things that we use routinely for other code enforcement. Those are not precluded by the inclusion of that language.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then specifically to the changes that were made, I didn't get a copy of that, but I did glance at Irene's copy before the meeting, and there was a section. Can I borrow that? Thank you.
It's because the rest of the council up here had an opportunity to look through that we received this evening. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. So there was a section, and I discussed this with the city manager earlier, where it was, to me, not exactly clear that the section referred to commercial and not residential properties. And I didn't see that stricken or adjusted in this copy, and so I was just wondering if we could elaborate. And I'm sorry, I believe it may have been section K.
Are you referring to, I think you're referring to the, right. Yeah, all it is talking about is when sprinklers are installed. We have a current ordinance that sprinklers are mandatory when new buildings are installed. And the three references that it's referring to is NFPA pamphlet 13D, which would be a reference for new homes when sprinklers are installed in new homes. And the other two, 13R would be multi-residential properties. 13 would be commercial properties. So it's just making a reference to the standard that we use when sprinklers are installed.
And what was confusing me is that the section is titled additions and alterations. It says additions and alterations are amended as follows, and then we have references to new home construction.
Okay, well, in that reference, it's referencing the commercial part of the ordinance. So I know it seems to be a little confusing, but it does reference, it talks about alterations and additions and alterations, but that had to do with the two ordinances that were being proposed. One was the residential ordinance and one was the commercial ordinance. Since we omitted the residential ordinance, it just makes reference now to the commercial ordinance. The three standards, like I said, refer to the three standards that are for each type of building occupancy.
Okay. So I'm still not clear why. I mean, additions and alterations to me means not new construction, and if this is just for commercial, then we are making a reference to NFPA pamphlet 13D for residential 1 and 2 family dwelling occupancy. So that's kind of contrary.
You're right. City Attorney, can you shed any light in addition to the Deputy Chief?
It appears that the title of section 903.1.2 is what it is in the state code, and without looking at the whole thing, it's difficult to say why it's titled that way. What I can say is that I don't believe that subsection 1a needs to be removed, because what number 1 says is an automatic fire sprinkler system shall be installed in the occupancies and locations as set forth in this section. So if the section does not require an installation in the occupancy, then A, B, and C don't apply. If it does require installation in one of the occupancies, like let's say residential new construction, then we use the standard that's in A. So I don't interpret this as having, I don't think A causes it to be applicable to the things that you wanted to take out.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Are you sure?
Through the chair,
That would be my interpretation if there were a question.
I commend the city attorney for clarifying it. I've been reading code books for 30 years, and we're always looking for the out, and we're looking for the exception. And that's the thing, is that, okay, if I'm going through the code and it says fire sprinklers, do I need fire sprinklers, additions, alterations? I get, okay, I'll read through this, and I'll check 13D, pamphlet 13D, and it says only for new residential, then I know I'm off the hook. But if I'm doing a commercial building, I'll have to check pamphlet 13 and find out that the commercial building that I'm altering or adding onto may have some conditions. Okay, it's clear. I do have another question related to the, I guess, the previously amended and ordinance. I'm looking at 903.6.1. This is in reference to, I believe, commercial buildings or non-residential, non-1 and 2 family residential buildings. And I'm just curious, 7,500 square feet of remodeling of any type of building that's not a residential, single family. So that's commercial buildings and industrial buildings. 7,500 square feet is remodeled. Is it and or $30,000 of building permit of construction? Or is
Building has to be at least 7,500 square feet and $30,000 of alteration has to be done.
So, for example,
And this is an existing
Yeah.
language that was adopted in the last ordinance. It's already in our ordinance.
okay, all right.
It's existing prior.
Yes.
This is a public hearing. If there's no other questions at this time to staff, is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak on this item? If not, we'll go ahead and close public hearing.
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, back to council. Any action, or does anybody want to adopt the ordinance?
We need a motion to waive second reading.
Thank you very much, Ken.
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to waive the second reading of the ordinance.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I'd like to introduce the ordinance for adoption.
Carol?
Councilmember Ivera.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Aye. Thank you. Now we will move up item 11 and receive our annual report from the Personnel Board. I believe Mr. Ed Fuentes will be presenting us. Oh, along with Joe this evening. You're welcome.
Good evening, Council. I'm Ed Fuentes, and I'm proud to present the City of San Bruno Personnel Board 2013 Annual Report. First of all, I want to introduce my fellow board members. With me here and in support is Joe Roberts. Not present, but here in spirit is Anna Marie Jones, the Vice Chair, and Ed Comerford. And I'd like to thank our staff help as well, Tammy and Kristen, who help us through these years, compiling information, reviewing the information, and helping us understand and dissect everything that's presented to the board. If I may, on 2013, some of the accomplishments that we achieved, we reviewed and recommended changes to 3 city job descriptions from finance, police, and information technology departments. As the organization changes, new descriptions need to be amended and reviewed, go through the personnel board, and then to the city council for final approval. In addition, in 2013, we recommended the extension of positions in the fire captain position and public works maintenance worker 1 and 2. We extended their eligibility list in 2013. And lastly, as far as our compliance requirements, we reviewed the 2013 Equal Opportunity Report, which looks at the city's employment both from the gender perspective as well as ethnicity. Going forward, 2014, we will continue to review the status of any recruitments, current eligibility list, as well as compliance reports. Continue to evaluate the recruitment processes as we deem necessary, as well as proctor written exams and evaluation tests as needed. And we will continue to review the city's job descriptions when they are presented to us. I thank you very much for your time, and I thank the City Council for your continued support of the Personnel Board.
Thank you very much, Ed. Is there any comments or questions from council?
I'd
Irene?
like to make a comment. Thank you. I congratulate you all, your whole team. This is tedious stuff, but it's so extremely important, and it's really crucial that somebody outside of the city family, so to speak, look at all these job descriptions and really take a close look at how we conduct our business. So I really appreciate what you do. I've been involved a little tiny bit in the last few years, and it's not all fun and games. It's a lot of work, but it's work that needs to be done, and I hope you realize how appreciated you are. Thank you.
Ken?
Thank you.
And I echo those comments also, but I got to hand it to Anna Marie Jones. She's been there for over 20 years, and with the health problems and the physical limitations she's been dealing with this last year or so, I give her a lot of credit too. So
Most definitely.
Thank you very much.
The cornerstone of our foundation.
yes, of course.
Board.
Well, once again, on behalf of the mayor and the rest of the council and the staff and the residents, we want to thank you very much for the time and the devotion that you put into this. We appreciate it, and thank you for being here tonight.
Pleasure to serve. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to public comment, please. It is the council's policy to refer matters brought up in this forum to staff for investigation and or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing and or acting upon any matter not agendized pursuant to state law. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak? If not, we will move on to item 10, conduct of business. First item is receive oral report on outreach to solicit applications for vacant citizen advisory committee, board and commission positions, and consider appointment of Park and Recreation Commission Youth Commissioner. Carol?
Honorable Council, in front of you, you should have an application for Brittany Chin, and tonight I would ask that you would consider her appointment to the Park and Recreation Commission. Right now, we have existing vacancies on Citizens Crime Prevention. There are 3 vacancies, one in Community Preparedness and one on the Traffic and Safety and Parking Committee. In an attempt to solicit citizens to volunteer, an article was put in the Daily Journal last Thursday, and it was the 3rd one that I've done, but I'm not getting any responses to them. There'll be an upcoming article in Focus, and it's been advertised on cable. In an additional effort to reach out to the community, today I got the names and addresses of 75 of the applicants that applied for the Community Foundation Board, and I'll be sending them letters and applications this week to see if they would be interested in any of our commissions. And I would be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for the city clerk on recruiting? If not, let's go to the next item that was brought up on that, and that we have an application before us. We, at our last meeting, did interview Ms. Chin, so is there any action or consideration from the council on the appointment?
I'd like to appoint Brittany Chin to the youth position for Park and Rec.
I'll second.
There's been a motion and a second to go ahead and make the appointment as the Youth Commissioner of Parks and Recreation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. Please tell her I think she's ready for the next meeting, which I think is coming up this month. Thank you. Go ahead and we'll move on to item B. Adopt resolution accepting the city's comprehensive annual financial report, single audit, and Measure A funds, audit report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2013. Mr. O'Leary. Back. Familiar face back talking about this.
The chair feels the same. Vice Mayor and members of the council, The California Government Code requires that all general law cities complete annual independent audits of their financial statements. Part of a city council member's governance and fiduciary responsibility includes generally understanding the financial condition of the city. It is for this reason that auditors communicate with the city council at the beginning of the audit to ascertain any issues or areas of concern by the city council. The audit for the city of the audit of the city of San Bruno's financial statements for the year ended June 30, 2013, was completed right at the end of last year. It was a deadline that permitted us to again submit our CAFR document for the annual award that is presented by the GFOA. So we did complete it on time at the end of the year to do that. So the CAFR report that you have tonight and the other reports were completed at that time. The City Council has a resolution on the agenda tonight accepting the audit. Prior to the City Council taking action, the engagement partner for our audit firm, Ahmad Garibay, is here to present the audit and to offer a very brief tutorial on reading CAFR statements. In addition, Aman and myself would be pleased to answer any questions that the City Council might have regarding the audit. So would like to introduce and turn the presentation over.
This is pretty exciting stuff. I can't wait.
Good evening. My name is Ahmad Garibay. I am the partner in charge of the audit of the city. You have the comprehensive annual financial report. This is an annual financial report. This is the results of operations for the city as of June 30, 2013. That's prior fiscal year. It is used by regulators, it is used by grantors, it is used by creditors, it is used by many different parties. And I'm going to walk you through the different components. I know it's about a 140-page report, but a few pages in there that are important when reading these financial statements that will give you a brief overview about the financial health of the city. I have an index here as to, or somehow a table of content of the division of this financial statement of the comprehensive annual financial report. It includes a letter of transmittal included in the introductory section, a financial section, a statistical section. The financial section is the results of the operations alongside with an opinion on the financial statements. We go in and we test the fair presentation of the financial statements. The introductory section has a section in it for GFOA Certificate of Achievement. Few cities apply for a certificate or an application for an award program whereby reviewers review these financial statements and they ensure that these financial statements are in compliance with the GASB, which is the standards that the city must adhere to when it comes to financial reporting. And I'm pleased to let you know that the city for 2012 had received that award, and we expect that they will receive it for 2013. The financial section, which includes the independent auditor's report, management discussion and analysis, it kind of briefly describes significant transactions that the city had entered into in 2013. The basic financial statements, some notes explaining these financial statements. Statistical sections are interesting component of the financial statements of the CAFR. They give you information about the residents, about income per capita, and so on and so forth. Just to pinpoint you, I know it's a big report, but just so that you would know the financial condition of the city, I want to pinpoint you to page 18 in the financial statements, which includes a consolidation of the city funds, all the city funds, alongside with some what we call convergent entries to include long-term assets and long-term liabilities. and we call it a statement of net position. It combines all the governmental funds, such as your general fund, and all the enterprise funds, such as your utility funds. And the best way to know the financial condition of the city is to take a look at the net position. This is what we call equity. This is how much money is left over after using assets against the liabilities. And the equity shows for the city. I have a quick overview over here in the slide that shows a summary between 13 and 12. And when you look at the two columns in there, it's quite comparative, which means that there are no significant transactions happening, with the exception to the net pension obligation bonds, or the OPEB bonds, or I'm sorry, the pension obligation bonds that the city had issued, and thereby increasing your non-current liabilities from about 40 million to 53 million. Other than that, the assets, current assets, capital assets, capital assets increased slightly because of some construction projects netted against depreciation. Current assets remain the same. Your current liabilities almost remain the same. Your equity almost remains the same. I'm going to go through that component of the net position where we have restricted and unrestricted. This is the spendable amount of the various components of funds. Unrestricted is for the general operation of the city, and the restricted is restricted for a specific purpose, mainly the utility funds is what you see in there. And you notice that the unrestricted had declined, and again, that's because of the issuance of the pension obligation bond. Now, it's a good thing that the city did issue pension obligation bonds and recognize that liability. In 2015, all cities, all governments are going to recognize pension liability, possibly after the OPEB liabilities are going to be recognized on the financial statements. Right now, when we talk about pension, when we talk about OPEB, it's just a reporting requirement. It does not go in those two columns. They are reported in the notes to the financial statements. They are legal liabilities for these governments, but right now they are not reported. The accounting standards are changed, or are being changed, whereby these liabilities will have to be reported on these statements of net position. Some highlights. Cash increased. Revenues are higher this year because property taxes, economy is getting better. Investment in capital assets, which is again capital assets, that's due to some of the construction that the city had done. These are example of the construction projects that the city had completed in 2013 or began working on in 2013. And then again, total net position decreased due to the addition of that $13 million net pension liability to the equity. Statement of activities, which is similar to the income statement. Again, it's also noted on page 20. I know it looks really big, but here's a summary. It kind of consolidated into one column where you see revenues minus expenses equals change in net position. And if you see it, net position did decrease, but mainly because of that pension obligation bond that the city had issued. Otherwise, it would be flat between the two different years. If you look at revenues, last year they were 82 million. This year they're 78 million. There's some timing differences. And I think that the main reason as to why revenues declined is you no longer get the property taxes related to the RDAs. That's the main reason as to why these declined. Expenses are extremely comparable to the prior year. This is just inflation adjustment. That's what's happening over there. The special item is the recognition of that pension obligation bond, which I will go through very quickly at the end of this presentation. Again, revenues improved in areas in general fund tax increments, sales tax, transit occupancy tax, and card room tax. General revenues decreased as a result of the loss of RDA property tax revenues, and then expenses are almost comparable to prior year, increased because of inflation, mainly because of retirement cost increases. We have a schedule of revenues, expenditures, specifically for the general fund. General fund is the main emphasis for the operation of the city. It's the main operating fund of the city. Most of the expenses operating expenses are posted to that particular fund. And I have it summarized in this PowerPoint, and you can actually see that on page 79 of the audit report. And it shows what the budget is, original and amended, and the variances between the budget and the actual. It's a good budget, not significant. There are not so many significant variances. Actually, they're all small. The budgeted fund balance with the city projected that the ending fund balance would be about 10 million. It ended up with about 11 million in fund balance in the general fund. Again, some of the explanations as to why there are changes between budget and actual. Again, revenues increased with the growth of property taxes. Revenues showed positive growth in fund balance, but fund balance decreased as a result of some of the transfers that the city had adopted with some of those reserve funds. And these reserve funds are the capital improvement reserve fund. About 5 million is what we put in there. Emergency disaster fund, about 3 million, alongside with the reserve within the general fund for $8 million. Okay, so we as auditors, you see these numbers here on the financial statements. The way that we audit them, we get a trial balance. We get a download from their accounting system, and we go out, we confirm these balances. We confirm your cash with banks. We confirm your receivables with the state, with the county, with the feds, whoever's giving you the future funds. We make sure that your payables are fairly stated. We audit these numbers, and we issue an opinion on the financial statements. And I'm pleased to let you know that our opinion was a clean opinion. We call it an unmodified opinion, which means that the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respect. All right. We do 2 more supplemental audits. Because you receive federal grants, you have to adhere to federal requirements. They have stricter requirements than what the state has, especially when you spend federal money, time certification, time accounting, purchasing requirements, strict purchasing requirement. We audit the federal grants on a sample basis, and I'm pleased to let you know that we had an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. We know also that you are required to have an annual audit on the sales tax that you receive from SamTrans, from San Mateo County Transportation Authority. We go in and we take a look at these expenses, we compare them with the ballot language, and we make sure that these expenses are in compliance with the ballot language. We are required to let you know if we had any difficulties in the performance of the audit. We can finish the audit, but sometimes if we encounter any difficulties, we are required to communicate that to you. And I'm pleased to let you know that we encountered no difficulties in the performance of the audit. As part of the audit, also, we take a look at the internal control. We like to see segregation of functions and duties. We like to see people who hold the asset are different from the people who account for the asset. And we took a look at the manner that you process payroll and HR, AP and purchasing, cash receipts and billing. And I'm pleased to let you know that when we looked at these internal controls, we noted no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses when it comes to the internal control. Now, governments, unlike commercial entities, governments adhere to what we call Government Accounting Standards Board, while commercial entities, they adhere to Financial Accounting Standards Boards. And little by little, those two are lining up with each other. With governments, there are certain liabilities that are reported in the notes to the financial statements as opposed to putting them on the balance sheet. And the way that the government or GASB requires these governments to recognize these liabilities is to amortize them over 10 to 30 years. A popular one is OPEB. Another one is the pension. They're both liabilities. They're both for past services that the employees had done for these governments. And there are funds that PERS will collect from the city once the person retires. And same thing with OPEB, your Teamsters are going to collect on the required funds in order to pay for these invoices. Now, before I go very quickly into OPEB, there is a new standard for pension, not OPEB, but they're almost basically the same. They're payments for future services. GASB 68, it came out about a year ago. It requires all governments nationwide to recognize that pension liability. Now, a lot of these governments are saying, well, the pension liability is located with CalPERS, and CalPERS pulls all these employees all together into one big plan. How am I going to calculate that liability? CalPERS will give you that liability. They are in the process of calculating that amount, and you will have to report it and record it on the financial statements. Similar to the OPEB, OPEB is not operated by CalPERS. Every city, every governmental agency has its own plan, so it has the ability to measure what that liability is. So going back to OPEB, again, you amortize it over 20 to 30 years, and you recognize that liability on those two-column set of financial statements that we showed you at the beginning of that presentation. So far, you recognize $12.8 million, but I believe your unfunded liability is, my memory serving me right, it is noted on page 75. And your actual liability is $46 million. What you've recognized already on the financial statements is $12 million. Nevertheless, your liability is $46 million when it comes to OPEB, and then you also have another liability, just like any other government, for pensions, and that also will be calculated by CalPERS and given to you, and that also will have to be reported on the financial statements. Accounting standards, this actually, practical experience encourages funding these liabilities, and the way to fund them is to establish a trust fund for funding these liabilities. And the finance department will review all strategies and alternatives, and they will come back to you with some funding options out there available. And with that, I'll be more than happy to take any questions.
Any questions from council? As you indicated, this is our first year without redevelopment.
That's correct.
The first full year.
Correct.
So the revenue is down, as you indicated. And how much is it down, maybe this time versus last time, because of that factor?
I believe RDAs were, and excuse me, I don't remember all the numbers, but I think they were collecting about $3 million every year in property taxes. 3.6 is what the RDA was collecting in property taxes. Now that will funnel back to the other governmental agencies, including yourself. So I'm not sure what the net came out to be after all that amount was funneled out. But it's not, I doubt it's a big number. It's probably going to be like 20% or 15%. I'm not sure exactly what the amount is, but it's not a significant component of the reallocation of that particular portion of property taxes.
Well, we have that liability that will go into effect because of the Gatsby.
Correct.
What does that do to us as a city if now that's on our books and we're issuing bonds? Because obviously it changes the dynamic of what somebody's looking at.
What we actually did is we went to the three credit agencies. We asked them the question. These pension liabilities were out there a long time ago. It's not like they were not there. They were not calculated or reported because of the manner that these governments work. They pull all these pension liabilities into one plan in Sacramento with CalPERS, and it's kind of hard to know the specific liability for each governmental agency. We don't anticipate that there will be an impact on your credit rating, so that's the good news that we know about. You don't know what will happen 10 or 15 years down the road, but in the short term, it wouldn't make sense for these credit agencies to say, oh, now we didn't know about that liability, because they did know about it, and they did know that it existed back in the days from an old time. Other than that, it will impact, we were reporting it. If the CAFR did report these liabilities, it did report the OPEB, it did report the pension liabilities in the notes to the financial statements. And now what GASB wants you to do is take that from a reporting requirement into a recording requirement. It's not a funding requirement, it's just a recording requirement. And what the difference between reporting and recording is that it impacts your equity. That net position that we've had on the slides over here, at the very bottom, you have $110 million. That's your equity. That's your assets minus your liabilities. Now, it's a significant component of your assets, and the way that GASB wants you to split it, they know that you're, as a government, you can't sell your capital assets. So when you present equity and you want to adhere to GASB, they tell you take out the capital assets component of equity and split it into a separate line item. So the last two line items are your spendable equity. That is what you have in money on a consolidated basis throughout the city. You got to subtract from that amount the pension liability. Now we did, because you replaced your pension liability, which was a reporting requirement, because the city replaced it with a pension obligation bond, it becomes an actual accounting liability, and therefore you did recognize a significant component of your pension liability in there. But nevertheless, all cities, all governmental agencies will have to recognize a pension liability that will reduce those last two numbers that you see in there on the financial statements. Now, they were reported. These pension liabilities were reported, and you can see them on page 73, is where you see how much do you have money with CalPERS and how much is the actual pension liability and how much is the unfunded. But you do have two plans with CalPERS. You have one, we call it the miscellaneous plan. There's another plan where it's kind of hard to calculate it because they pull all the category of employees together. It's called the safety plan. The safety plan, we don't know what that number is. CalPERS will calculate it, but a portion of that we already know, which is that unfunded liability, which is about 16 million in pension liabilities is what you have on the financial statements. That will be recorded in 2015 when the GASB becomes effective.
Thank you. Other questions from council? Does anybody, Mr. O'Leary or from finance, want to add additional comments to what's been given?
I had two additional comments, not related to the financial statement, so I don't know if there's any other questions. Would be glad to respond. I guess that the two things I would like to comment on is I think the council is well aware that I sat here for many years taking all the credit for work that I actually never did. But I would feel remiss if I took any credit this time around, especially in the middle of the audit. The finance director left the city, and Darlene Wong, our accounting manager, picked up really significant responsibility for completing the audit and getting it and working with the auditor. Darlene had really not experienced that role before, and in the time I've been here, the 6 weeks I came until the audit was completed, I watched next door what Darlene was going through. And so I just wanted the council to know that Darlene just made a very significant effort in the completion of this unqualified audit. So I would like to mention that. The other comment I would have is that the finance department believes that the auditors significantly and rigorously adhered to the contract requirements, and to let you know that this particular audit is the third and final year of the contract as it currently exists. It was a 3-year contract. There are probably competing interests in engaging in a new contract. There could be higher costs. There's the effort of going through the bid process or the proposal process. From the finance perspective, there's also when there are quality auditors, that's a good thing from our perspective. When someone new comes in, the first year is a significant increase in the workload to explain every transaction to the new auditors. Now, some people say, well, that's a good thing. You have new eyes looking and so forth. So there is somewhat competing. Several times in the past years that I'm aware of, a 3-year contract has been extended to 5 years. And it would be the recommendation based on what we think is a quality service by a quality firm. It would be our recommendation that this would be a time to consider extending the contract for the firm for 2 additional years. If the council would entertain that possibility, Finance would be prepared at your next meeting to bring back an agreement amendment extending the work through the year 2015.
Any other questions, council? Any action by council?
Through the chair. I thought you were new. I thought you were a Kelly girl or something. Yeah. Anyway, I realize how complicated it is, and the previous finance director learned everything she did from you, I'm sure, and I know that whole department is very proficient and very deserves all the credit and all the accolades that I'm sure you're going to receive the next award, and the recommendation to it needs to come from that department. It needs to come from your department, in my opinion, working together with this firm. And if that's the case, then I'd be in favor of that. With that, do we need a formal
resolution?
And I'd like to introduce a resolution to accept this audit. Carol.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell. Aye. Vice Mayor Medina.
Aye, and also Mr. O'Leary had asked if we wish to have it considered to be brought back at the 25th meeting in February for an extension of the agreement. Is that the council's desire? Yes. Please have that put on the 25th agenda. And Darlene, thank you on behalf of the council and the mayor for all your work and your effort to have this brought forward and taken care of. And thank you for your report and being here this evening.
Thank you.
Item C, Jim's not going anywhere. Receive quarterly financial update report as of December 30th, 2013, and adopt a resolution approving a mid-year agreement for 214 General Fund, Special Revenues Fund, Enterprise Fund, and Capital Improvement Budget.
Vice Mayor and members of the council, as was indicated, we are at the 6-month period, and Finance a couple of weeks ago closed the books for the month of December, representing the first half of the year and our ability to report to the council the trends of revenues and expenditures for the general fund and for all of the funds, what we're experiencing through half of the 2013-14 fiscal year. My comments tonight will focus on the general fund generally and make just a couple of comments on some of the other funds, and then there are 2 items on the budget amendment that I will mention. Revenues in the general fund through the first half of the year amount to $17,250,000. This is 49% of the budget for this year. This amount, the $17 million, is $1.3 million higher than what we received in the first half of last year. Last year at this time, we were also at 49%. So there is some tracking of this year, I believe, to last year. The city's revenues have significantly improved since I was last sitting here, and congratulations to the council. Growth in the last couple of years has been significant, I think, as the economy has recovered from a recession period. But I think it's also important for the council to recognize where you have come from. Things are clearly vastly improved. But I would just like to point out that currently our revenues are about $35 million, or the budget is $35 million. In 07-08, the budget called for this general fund revenues to be a little over $34 million. But it dropped off over $3 million after that. So if you look at the long-term trend, we're only back where we should be. We're not in any exorbitant position if you look at the longer-term context. So in general, I would believe that revenues this year in the general fund will exceed the budget, really as they have in the last couple of years. Property tax is coming in higher than was projected, in part because of this again, property tax revenue that we're currently getting that previously was part of the redevelopment disillusionment. Hotel and motel tax is higher. And again, I would believe that because of the robust business environment at Bay Hill, that business travel in San Bruno continues to be very robust, and I think that represents the higher hotel tax. Business tax is higher. The city is increasingly recruiting substantial, identifiable businesses that are contributing significant revenues as part of their cost of doing business in the city, the way the city business license is structured. So those three taxes, those three revenues are significantly increased. I would mention departmental revenues. Recreation is $146,000 higher in the first half of this year compared to last year. There are several identifiable program areas, after school being one, where there is higher participation rate and higher revenues as a result of that. But might mention just one thing on the downside. While I say the net overall will be up, on the downside, sales tax, our sales tax line item will actually be down this year, I believe. And what I just want to point out to the council is there is no issue with sales tax revenue itself, but the state has taken upon itself, based on their recalculation of ERAF refunds that the city has gotten in the past, they have calculated that the city was over reimbursed in ERAF refunds. And so the state, from our sales tax each month, they are deducting an ERAF amount. So while the sales tax itself is on target, we probably in that line item, because of what the state is taking away, will be about $400,000 less in that line item. But that's a 1 year event. It'll occur this year, but it will not repeat in future years. So that's a hit we'll take. Overall, I mean, one thing I might mention is last year, at the midpoint of the year for general fund revenues, we were at 49% of budget. At the end of the year, the actual number, according to the CAFR, we turned out to be 107%. So last year was really a significant increase. My estimation for this year would be that we're going to go over, but it'll be nowhere near 107%. It'll probably be 102% or 101%. So we'll be over, but the expansiveness of the increase is really not as much. So that was my comments about revenue in the general fund. I don't know if there's any questions on that. Again, expenditures, Expenditures are at 50%. They were at 50% last year. So again, you know, from the council oversight and from the manager, the managing of the expenditure side of the budget appears absolutely on target, and would not expect any over budget on the expenditure side, and really because of salary savings and vacant positions, would have some belief that revenues will probably come under budget by the end of the year. On the enterprise accounts, the four enterprise accounts, the revenues and expense vary a little bit off of the 50%, but it's really consistent with last year and the prior year. So I don't think there's anything there of significant comment at this point. On the internal service funds, I would just point out a number that kind of stands out, that we have through the first 6 months of the year spent 77% of the expenditure total. One of the reasons that it's always high, it's always much higher than 50%, because the single biggest portion of that is the liability premium that we pay to ABAG each year, and that's not split over the course of the year. We pay it once at the beginning of the year, so there's this larger payment. And the ABAG premium was actually $180,000 more this year than it had been last year. So the expenditure is more. The premium they're charging was more. And the workers' comp claim costs, despite the number of claims coming down, the average cost is going up, so there's a higher expense on workers' comp claim costs. So that explains the high number as it relates to the self-insurance fund. On the budget amendment, there are really two items. There are three entries, and these are items that the council had previously considered. There was the fire hose replacement for the fire department. This was actually a council action back in August, increasing the general fund expenditure budget requirement by $25,000 for hose replacement. So this is the budget authorization for that. The other item affects both appropriations and expenditures. And this is related to our Measure M fund and related to the Grand Boulevard initiative. So there is an additional $11,000 required for regular salaries, in addition to the grant work that is being done, or the Grand Boulevard work that is being done as far as the case study. And again, the council acted on this item back on September 10th. So those are the two items in the budget amendment, and the brief overview of the mid-year financial, and I'd be glad to answer any questions the council has.
Any questions from council? If not, any action on the resolution for the mid-year amendment?
I'll introduce the resolution.
Carol?
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Aye. Item D, adopt resolution approving installation of a 2-hour time-limited parking restriction zone along Shelter Creek Lane to provide street sweeping access. Clara?
The city is responsible for a comprehensive street sweeping program to keep the city clean and to improve the looks and the feel of the city, and also to prevent trash to enter the bay. To do an effective job with our street sweeping, east of El Camino, the city implemented a mandatory parking restriction during the time of the street sweeping activity, The reason for implementing on the east side is those streets are flat, they are narrow, and with lots of trees. And a volunteer parking program, parking restriction program on the west side of the El Camino for those streets are different than on the east side, with two special management area on the west side. One of the special management area is the Shelter Creek Lane. The reason for this special management area at that location is that Shelter Creek condominium is one of the highest density in our development in our city, and also Shelter Creek Lane is very narrow and with a very high street parking demand. How is this special program, enhanced program, is implemented now is twice a year. The city will post the mandatory parking restriction, typically in the May, in the spring, and then later in the fall, depend when the tree leaves will fall, just before the first rain will come. And we'll have a mandatory parking restriction during that time in order for the city to be able to do a better job cleaning Shelter Creek up to the curb. The management of Shelter Creek approached the city that they would like a improved program to be implemented on Shelter Creek Lane. Instead of having twice a year mandatory parking restriction, to have a ongoing mandatory parking restriction for the time when the street Shelter Creek will be swept. After consideration of many possible alternatives, staff discussed with TSPC those possible alternatives, and staff recommends implementation of a monthly mandatory parking restriction on Shelter Creek. Right now, Shelter Creek Lane is swept Thursday. To minimize the impact of the overall neighborhood of the displacement of those cars during a mandatory parking restriction, staff recommends to change from Thursday to Friday to have on a different day the street sweeping on Shelter Creek than in the other neighborhood streets, and to have a mandatory parking restriction implemented first Friday of the month on the west side of Shelter Creek Lane, and a mandatory parking restriction on the east side of Shelter Creek Lane for each third Friday of the month, to be able to do a more comprehensive, a better job cleaning Shelter Creek Lane. This ongoing existing program costing us, the city, more than $7,000 a year. This posting the mandatory parking restriction would cost us around one-time $5,000 cost. And due to the fact that changing the day and the street sweeping would happen on Shelter Creek on Fridays, instead of Thursday will increase our ongoing cost with about $1,600 a year. But even with this additional slight increase of the ongoing cost, the overall will be net cost reduction on ongoing basis for the city. If this recommendation is supported by you, then this program would be implemented in beginning of April, and between now and April, very aggressive public communication and outreach will take place with the residents of Shelter Creek condominium, but also with the neighborhood also, to make sure that everybody is aware of these changes. I have here also Ted Chapman, service manager for street and storm, to help me with any question you might have. This is my presentation, if you have any questions.
Questions to staff? Ken?
Has the Shelter Creek, obviously they brought the issue before us. Have they been apprised of what your plan is and what proposed dates and times that you're proposing? And have they commented?
They are very pleased with the proposal. Was a ongoing communication between staff and the management of the condominium, and this would meet their expectation and their desire.
The dates, the times, the proposed
Yes.
times? And then my other question is, why would there be additional overtime costs? Correct me if you've explained that the street sweeper is scheduled to go down Shelter Creek, and because there's still cars there, just drives right down the middle of the street. So, our routes are calculated in a certain way to minimize the miles traveled for the street sweeper each time. If the street sweeper will sweep the neighboring street, Whitman and Cortland, Thursday, but has to go back to the same neighborhood with a separate trip just to clean Shelter Creek Lane, that will add a additional overall time to the street sweeping activity. That's why, based on our estimate at this time, that will have a slight impact to overall time requirement to finish every herd of street sweeping, and this is our best estimate at this time, that might slightly increase the time needed. That's $1,700 annual increase?
Annually.
Okay.
You are correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any action on the resolution?
I'll adopt the resolution.
Carol?
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Aye. Items E and F have been pulled and will be brought back on the February 25th. I believe it should be item G. Receive oral report from City Clerk on her attendance at the new election law seminar that was held December 4th through the 6th in San Diego last year. Carol?
Honorable Council, in December I attended the new election law seminar in San Diego. At the seminar, they gave us updates on the Brown Act, FPPC, election law updates, transparency strategies, and then my favorite was customer service, and I'm going to share it with you. They presented a film done by Mr. Farrell of Farrell's Ice Cream, and it was a half a day long, so it was really, it consumed a great deal of our time, but the name of it was called Give Me the Pickle. evidently, Mr. Farrell had a customer who had asked for an extra pickle on their hamburger, and the person waiting on them said, no, you can't have any other pickle. So they went to Mr. Farrell and they complained. And he took his entire staff and he said, whatever the customer wants, you want to give it to him. You want to please the customer. And translating his theory to us, the whole idea is customer service. Give them what they want. And that's what I got out of the seminar. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
You better stock up on pickles. I like pickles.
Through the chair.
Irene?
Get pickles in the office.
I was curious, what changes have been made to the Brown Act?
They talked about the Brown Act, but I didn't hear specific changes. They just went over all the things that regarding the Brown Act.
Oh, okay, it's just so like a review.
Right.
Okay,
right.
thank you.
The FPPC and the election laws, yes, there were changes, but the Brown Act, they just reviewed it.
Any other questions?
Through the chair.
Michael?
So our Form 700s are due, I believe, next month, so anything we need to be aware of?
I'm thinking of making a contest to see if I can get everybody's timely. It'd be nice. I've gotten 25 already, including Councilmember O'Connell.
I concede.
But Michael,
So, yeah, any changes that we need to be aware of that might impact what we report on the Form 700?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Moving on to the report of commission boards and committees. We had taken care of that earlier. Comments from council members. Ken?
So Vice Mayor, just a quick thank you to the community and city staff for making another successful Relay for Life kickoff last Wednesday at the Rec Center. The community is coming out. There's more, even though we're promoting this event on April 26th and 27th, be assured that there's going to be more activities and more publicity for Relay for Life in the coming months. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? If not, under closed session, we do have a closed session special meeting, and it will be for 4 items. One is the liability claim pursuant to Government Code Sections 5496, 56.95. Another one is conference with labor negotiations pursuant to Government Code Section 5496, 57.6. And there also are 2 items, public employee performance evaluation pursuant to Government Code Section 54957. For the city attorney and city manager. There will be no reportable action items to report after the meeting, so at this time we'll go ahead and adjourn to our next regular city council meeting, which will be held February 25th, 7 p.m. here at the San Bruno Senior Center. Everyone have a good rest of the week and a happy Valentine's Day.